Welcome to today's lesson. Today we will be looking at an introduction to ecosystems, Unit 1. So as we proceed into today's lesson, the first thing I would like for us to do is to actually define environment. So a definition of environment in relation to environmental studies, the word environment comes from the French word environ, which means everything that surrounds us. Now, most of you would be coming into this course already with some kind of prior understanding or knowledge of that word environment, because environment is a very common word that has been bandied about a lot in recent times. So as we go through today's session, you begin to understand that there are many different types of environments. There are natural environments as well as man-made environments. So the environment is everything that surrounds us as human beings. So as we proceed, in the context of the study of the environment, let's look at some basic themes that would tend to be a focus for environmental scientists and environmental managers worldwide. The first theme would be people and nature, and how people and nature are intimately connected. So with regards to ecosystems and ecology, there's a lot of study there that goes into how the processes and functions of different ecosystems and different natural environments, how human beings relate to them, and how natural environments can be affected by the things that people do and the ways in which human beings are dependent on our environment. So it's important for us as environmental scientists and environmental managers in whatever area of specialization you may be in, that we understand that nature and human beings cannot exist independent of each other. Another area of focus is also the rapid human population growth, and this is a very important issue for environmental studies because, as I mentioned in the previous point, the interconnectedness of human beings and nature. And it's very important for us to understand, if you look at the second point, that we must learn to sustain our environmental resources. It's very important for us to understand that our environment has finite resources. Those resources do not increase with time. However, our human population is increasing. So how do we find that balance if human beings require resources from our earth and from nature in order to survive? How do we find that balance where we can utilize what we need and still ensure that we do not destroy the environment, thereby leaving little or nothing for future generations? Another important theme, next point, human beings affect the environment of the entire planet. So as mentioned before, everything we do, extraction of resources for food, fishing industry, extraction of timber from forests for building and firewood and energy, and drilling for oil, extraction of coal, all of these things that we've done over hundreds, even thousands of years, it affects the environment. All right. Modern times has presented even more concerning problems for us where industry is concerned. Additionally, the next point, urban environments need attention. That is another way that we affect the environment, where we have built environments such as towns, cities, villages, etc. And these types of environments are artificial landscapes that human beings have created in order for us to gather and congregate in smaller spaces. And this type of activity, where the growth in urban environments, this is also closely related with industrialization. And lastly, another important theme is solutions to environmental problems. This involves making value judgment based on scientific knowledge. So it's very important here for us to understand as well, environmental managers and environmental scientists, um, the, the, the gathering of data and information from the environment is critical to informing solutions to environmental problems. Hence, you will find the focus that environmental scientists and managers give to environmental monitoring and data collection. So that's an important part of environmental studies as well. So moving on, our ecosystem is made up of components. We have another slide a little later on where we have a visual of that. But our ecosystem is made up of two categories of components, abiotic and biotic. So ecosystems are essentially made up of these categories. So abiotic being non-living things and biotic being living things. Under abiotic, in an environment, you would find elements or components like sunlight, temperature, precipitation, moisture, soil and soil water, chemistry, etc., and even soil biology, where you would be concerned with the presence of earthworms, etc., in the soil. Additionally, if we look at the other column, biotic, we also have categories of biotic organisms, and all of these are very important to any ecosystem. Of course, from one ecosystem to the other, sometimes based on geography, ecosystems would be located in different geography locations, different climatic regions, where all of the abiotic factors or components may vary, and where those factors vary, you find biotic components would also vary. So from one ecosystem to the other, you find a whole variety of different types of biotic components. Some of these biotic components would be your primary producers, which would be like your plants. Herbivores would be organisms that eat plants. Carnivores would be organisms that eat herbivores, and omnivores are your organisms that eat both plants and animals. And of course, your detritivores, sorry, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, those would be your organisms that consume droppings and carcasses. So you will be talking about things like earthworms, fungus, things like that. Alright, so it's important to understand that from one region to the next and one ecosystem to the next, that you find these variations. Let us also look at disciplines which make up environmental studies. So we have earth sciences, and your earth sciences would be all those sciences, even related to the hard sciences such as physics, chemistry, and biology. All right, all these sciences and their areas of specializations that focus on different aspects of the environment. For example, physics with regards to the earth and the bodies in outer space. Geochemistry here would be chemistry focused on the earth. Cosmochemistry focused on planetary bodies. There's also geology, natural history, earth and planetary dynamics, even water, global water. So there's a focus on water sciences on the earth with regards to the earth. Life sciences and radiation, this would be energy and physics, overlap with physics here. Global chemistry, so there'll be different scales of chemistry, such as geochemistry would be focused on things like soils and rocks. Global chemistry would be on a larger scale, and then you have climate science. So all of these types of hard sciences can actually find specializations with regards to the study of the earth and the environment. Then we have engineering sciences, which would tend to focus, if you follow with my cursor, environmental safety and management, and also urban development. So in other words, we're looking at how the engineering sciences can aid in the management of the health and safety of human beings in the environment, as well as nature, and also in the urban environment. So some of the things they may look at would be materials. How do building materials, what is the nature of the building materials? Is it toxic? Is it durable? Can it withstand hurricanes, for example? Can it withstand floods? Is it flammable? Is it waterproof? Things of that nature. So all of these things would be very important from an environmental perspective as well. Look at this one. Even architecture and the environment, there's a specialization in that area as well, because, for example, the way in which you design and build an urban structure can either aid or harm human and environmental safety, as well as contribute to the sustainable design of a building structure. And that sustainable design of a building structure would look at things like energy efficiency, durability of the building, so how well is the building performing, all right, the health of the inhabitants inside the building, etc. So engineering sciences can play a very important part here. And then, of course, as mentioned before, environmental policies, also a very important part of environmental studies. The human and social aspect of the environment will contribute significantly to the types of policies, policies are essentially guidelines that authorities such as governments and their agencies would put in place in order to achieve a particular legal objectives. So oftentimes policies will inform legislation, and those legislations, as we mentioned before, really should be informed by scientific information and data. So the scientists should be informing those policies. So who would be involved in the policies and contributing to the development of policies? As I mentioned, law and politics, governments, and legal persons. Also, what is going on in the environment in terms of economics. What is our dominant industry? For example, Trinidad and Tobago has a dependence on the petroleum and natural gas industry. What environmental policies should be formed with regards to that knowledge and information? Maybe we should be looking into diversification of our economy, and moving towards renewable energy sources. Geography is a very broad discipline. Understanding of both the human and natural environment can inform policy development. Sociology would look at things like culture and community values, and the things that concern the community and various disadvantaged groups, etc. How does information from these disciplines inform environmental policy? Psychology, what is the mindset of the community at large, and how are those mindsets and thinking affect either positively or negatively affect our environment? So this information can inform the development of our policies. So now we're moving into ecosystems and zooming in a little bit on ecosystems. So let's make sure we have a proper definition of ecosystems. We talked about biotic and abiotic components. Let's look at the definition. So ecosystems is a biological community that occurs in some locale or locations where physical and chemical factors make up its non-living or abiotic environment. So bear in mind, an ecosystem must have both biotic and abiotic components. So here, for example, we have a little illustration of an ecosystem. Now, bear in mind, ecosystems can be very small. The scale of it can be very small. For example, you can literally have a micro ecosystem existing under a rock, because you will have soils, you may have organisms, some soil moisture, certain amount of oxygen, etc. occurring under that rock. And then you have macro ecosystems on a much larger scale. For example, large geographic regions, like a temperate region or a temperate forest, tropical forest, etc. Right? So some examples of our abiotic components: we see the sun here, radiation from the sun. We have soil, rocks, water. Those are all nutrients. Those are all examples of abiotic components. I see we have some fire here as well, fire disturbances, clouds, rain. And then we have our abiotic, such as our soil organisms, insects. We have some fish, these look like birds, our plants and forests. Alright, and all of these will make up an ecosystem where the biotic components are dependent on the abiotic components for survival. So at this point we should be understanding then that if the abiotic components depend on if the biotic components depend on the abiotic components for survival, this brings to the forefront the importance of managing our environment, because when we destroy our environment with regards to abiotic components, you are now disrupting that ecological cycle where our abiotic components require those where our biotic components require our abiotic components in order to survive. So you're disrupting the cycle, and that can have very bad long-term effects. So at this point I want to thank you for joining me for today's lesson. I would like to direct you to eClassroom for today's activities. Please read all instructions carefully and make sure that you view all reading material and documents made available to you. Thank you for joining me.